let me go to another fantastic guest, my man, Koffi Kouakou. He is African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies in the University of Johannesburg. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing, Koffi? You doing okay today?
I'm doing fine. Good morning to you and to your audience, Jamal.
Well, thank you,
It's
man. I
nice and
appreciate it.
sunny, but a bit chilly here in South Africa.
Is it? See, I don't know the temperatures in South Africa. What does it look like when it's in I don't know, let's say August in South Africa?
Well, listen, we're in winter now, so it's sort of reversed for you.
Are
So
you?
while you're in summer, because we're in the southern hemisphere, so it flips the opposite.
Interesting, interesting.
Yes.
It's been 90 degrees every day in Malaysia. So it's been hot every day here. And if I'm not mistaken, even going into like October, November, it's like 80 degrees. It's warm all year. Thank you for joining me, man. I really do appreciate it. You
Well,
hit me up with this piece where you were pointing out that Russia is helping the Sahel states build nuclear power plants. I am fascinated by that. And the reason why I am, just to explain to the audience. One of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, Burkina Faso, most of the country didn't even have roads. This was something that Ibrahim Traore was actually doing, getting roads built and using the people in Burkina Faso to build those roads. And apparently he built more roads in the time frame that he has been in office compared to the entirety of the time like France and many of these other political systems was running the country. And so to add in now nuclear power, that is a big deal. Like that's a huge jump in regards to the economic output, energy output, et cetera. Go into that for me, because I do want to get into a quirk with that I think might be an issue that needs to be resolved. But go into that just to explain it to the audience.
hmm. Well, listen, thanks for bringing that subject because it's one of the most neglected subjects ever. In fact, I've always said that there are no great nations without effective energy sovereignty. This is a big one. And in fact, it's not just having all these political organizations, the African Union or ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, all these. I mean, there are plenty of them that are running around. But the basic elements of strength and power, because that's what it is. It's about energy production, control, manufacturing, and also utilization for effective development. That is the core of the debate since what we call the independence of African states. And it is also the fuel for the struggle for independence and sovereignty. And anybody who doesn't understand that is either a fool, an imbecile, or just outright is just dismissing it. But that's the core of it. And African nations have been sort of sidelines about all these debates, debt reduction and all this stuff, but there hasn't been a serious, coherent energy strategy across the continent. There's a lot of talks. I remember as a young man at the World Bank, we're putting this on this. And even during the times of President Obama, there was some kind of energy power Africa, if I think I'm not mistaken, but it
Yeah.
never went anywhere. And so power, both figuratively and then literally, are at the heart of this request and call for sovereignty for Africa and for any other nation around the world. And that's one of the reasons when you can manufacture it or produce it well enough, especially for your civilian side of it, but also for your weapon sides, you become a fearsome, not just enemy, but also country that people won't attack and mess around easily. We've
Right.
seen what's happening in Iran. We've seen what's happened in Iraq. We've seen what's happened in Gaddafi next door here in Libya, and also Syria, a bit of that. So this is you made a very important point. It's a huge deal for Mali and Burkina Faso with the support and help of Russia and the Russian, big energy company Rosatom is helping to put that together. Thanks to President Putin and Ibrahim Traore and Assimi Goita. And as you know, both of them already been to Russia to sign the deals in March 2025. which means first build the civilian strength of energy production and consumption. I mean, there are very few African countries, probably one or two, I think only South Africa, have serious, nuclear energy. I know Egypt now has been helped by Russia,
Yeah.
but these are the few. And we know, the propaganda has been telling people, no, we don't need nuclear power plants. After the Chernobyl issue way back, and when the Soviet Union was still the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
But Russia and China are among the top leaders in energy, nuclear energy today. Well, of course, that includes the United States and some of the European nations, especially France and
France.
Britain and so forth. Yeah. But this is, to summarize it, this is at the core of it. And these two nations, Burkina Faso and Mali, and of course, I'm sure Niger is going to also move on because they have the Sahelian state, the alliance of the Sahelian state. So if they can produce enough energy to power the industry for industrial growth, this will be really significant. And you remember, and I'm sure you do, and our audience also does, that every time, I mean, most energy companies tend to produce a map of the African continent. I mean, this is a large continent, about 30 million square kilometers or so, a little bit over that. And then you can only see few lights in different places in South Africa, a bit in Egypt, somewhere in Morocco, and so forth. So this is a deficiency. There is a huge market for energy generation, not only production, manufacture, control, and then also distributing it so that people can have something to work with. I mean, beside the roads and other infrastructure, energy infrastructure and sovereignty is at the top of the priority of any African country that wants to be sovereign. And this is why this deal with Russia is significant. Of course, we'll discuss the implications.
Yeah. I mean, look, for anybody who questions that, think of America. I mean, when Edison got the light bulb, right? And you start seeing light lamps light up all these various regions of the country. I mean, and it's kind of a common sense thing. Or at least I would think it is. I mean, anything that's built requires energy. It's when they tried to make this argument that Russia was Nigeria with snow, or Russia was a gas station masquerading as a country, or Russia was, and it's like, dude, these are real resources. Like your ability to produce energy is a real thing.
Yes.
And when you're producing grain, wheat, energy, etc. Okay, well, if you need to create diapers, that requires energy. If you need to create food, that requires energy. Like all of these things requires energy. And if you don't have those things at your disposal, it is very difficult for you to be a sovereign country. Look at Europe right now, and the way that Europe took an L with all of those companies and all closing up or leaving Europe because they couldn't get their hands on cheap fuel. That fuel was coming from Russia. When they pissed Russia off, that fuel was no longer available to Europe. So it matters. I guess my point is I'm agreeing with you. It matters greatly in being able to produce your own energy for your own public consumption. The issue, I think, is security. So when Ibrahim Traore went to Moscow in order to visit Putin, he was given a hero's welcome. And this was during the Victory Day parade and celebrations. And the day he got back to Burkina Faso, there was an attack that killed, I think, like 100. You correct me if I'm wrong on the number, but it was a lot of people. I think it was like 100 people.
Somewhere 140 or so, yeah, killed.
Okay, that's what I thought. They were killed in this kind of raid from terrorists. Now, the U.S. has a terrorist factory sitting in Syria right now that they've removed sanctions from and that they are effectively cultivating a caliphate that I have no doubt will be used to move around the globe to go after whoever they need to go after with their fingerprints supposedly not on it. Is that a concern in this? I mean, security has to be, and as you pointed out, to build your own weapons. So agreed. Like that doesn't make you a warmonger, that makes you honest and rational. But security has to be an issue. In the Ukraine, these guys are lobbing missiles and bombs at nuclear power plants. Is there any concern that creating nuclear power plants in these regions will come under attacks?
Well, I think it's a genuine concern, but people have made it a misplaced concern. And the reason why I'm saying this, it reminds me of my days as a young man at the World Bank when the
Mhm.
internet was coming up. And at all the meetings I'll go with USA, USID, and even World Bank and IMF executives, they'll say, it's such a complicated thing. It's a difficult thing to put in Africa. They don't have the skills, and people are not educated to make this happen. And I could read, not in just between the line, but right in front of me, and then my nose was getting bigger and bigger because I was just getting irritable and angry.
Wait,
You know,
you were, wait. I did not know that you were,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm going to let you finish that. The audience always bitches at me when
Yeah,
I
no,
interrupt.
go ahead. I'll
But
finish
I'm
after
super
you.
curious. You've piqued my interest on this. And
Hmm.
I do want you to finish your point. You
Yeah.
worked at the World Bank. Okay. What were you doing when you were working at the World Bank? You piqued my
I
interest.
was working in the energy area, especially environmental issues, environmental information systems, satellite issue. How do you use geoinformation technologies to improve agriculture, health, education, everything else, infrastructure? And that was a key for it. And as a
And that was,
young man, I was associated with a team there in the Africa, one of the African division, which was called the Africa Technical and Environmental Sustainable, with the acronym of AFTS.
oh.
I was way back in the early '90s, all the way to mid early 2000.
And during that, you worked with USAID.
Yes,
And
and also these things. And the comments were, you know, Africans don't have those skills and it will be very complicated. I'm using this analogy because it has a really important connections
yeah,
onto this nuclear issue and you're bringing the security issue. And as I'm saying, yes, we should be concerned about the security. But for goodness sake, Russia is not going to bring its know-how and technology in Burkina Faso and then create a security disaster because Russia has already signed up all kinds of peaceful agreement at the UN level, UN national security level. It's a key thing. My concern and then my irritation when it comes to Africa is that there's this feeling that, oh my goodness, these darkies, won't be able to manage this. It's a big security issue. It's beyond their thinking. And that's one of the reasons I said it's misplaced, because that's how they see it. And which is wrong because we have some of the best technologists and some of the guys are doing some great work. There is very little difference. In fact, some of the top people, if you look at South Africa, in fact, I'm going to talk about something called the Pelindaba Treaty. And but I'll talk about this a little bit later. But this analogy is so important because every time it comes to Africa to organize something that's big, having planes, organizing some serious infrastructure, build cities that are, modern and developed, there's this concern that it's not going to work because Africans won't be able to manage it. The African won't be able to manage it. Why don't we do the same as people in the sort of West Asia, Qatar, and other places, and source in the competencies and the talent? Japan did it. China did it. Why is it so difficult for Africa? And that sort of mentality around it and say they won't be able to do it. And I dismiss that, although it's a serious concern. But I think the underlying belief system, the worldview that's sort of putting Africa that's saying, oh, they're not going to be able to do it, they can't do it, don't take it there. That's what I dismiss. And was strong and on the left, right? It
yeah,
needs to happen. They need to have those nuclear power plants to service their energy needs, energy sovereignty, and industrial growth. I don't think that will be a problem. Russians, experts and people coming to install it, know their responsibilities in this, and they're not going to play with it. They'll be very serious. And that's
yeah,
why I think President Putin and his team are signing this deal. But what it does is the implications are enormous because if these countries can develop, in terms of having energy independence or at least some kind of sovereignty, it can help them to become stronger and stronger.
yeah,
And Russia is really playing a huge role, and it's going to spread throughout West Africa very soon. And I think, and it's clear the evidence is Western countries don't want that to happen, especially France. Has been booted out, last year or so. And then, of course, the Americans, they don't want to see that. The British don't want to see that. You can't have a great power, a great country without energy independence.
Industrial power.
And if that is stopped, we have a problem. However, it's not that Mali and Burkina Faso will be building weapons to kill people. You see, this is the extrapolation that we see very quickly. We've seen the same nonsense with Iran. And that Iran's building nuclear. For 30 or 40 years, we've heard this from Prime Minister Netanyahu. But if Iran is building nuclear weapons, the question is, and many people have been asking this question, so what? You have them. Why don't you have other people? Why can't other people have them? Oh, no, they're not good. They don't know how to manage this. So we don't have them because they're going to use it to kill us. That's exactly the notion to debunk. And we know the fundamental necessity, the required necessity for these countries to have some form of energy production. And if they find that nuclear is what they want and they can source that from a very safe country, they'll have it. And I'm sure you've also heard. In fact, I should have sent it to you. China is now developing very small reactors,
yes,
but powerful, that are now doing extraordinary good work. And
that
China,
by the way.
Yes, and they came out, in fact, last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they're going to be distributing them across the continent. We need that. One small reactor can feed a city of a little bit more than 500,000 people for a year. I mean, this is huge. And Africa needs these kind of technologies. And that's going to spur the strength and development of Africa. If we don't have that, we're in trouble. But let me come back to close on the Pelindaba Treaty. But before the Pelindaba Treaty, in 1964, the Organization for the African Union, which is now the African Union now, became the African Union in 2000, I think, have declared that they want an Africa nuclear-free zone, 1964, okay, at the Cairo. And then they came back again in I think, if I get my numbers right, it was probably in 2009, they adopted another treaty in Cairo. They get a complete free zone, nuclear free zone, especially for weapons. So the safety mechanism is already there because most African countries have signed that. So they're not going to go into nuclear weapons. But it's a tricky one because many people have been thinking, I said, wait a minute, this is a trick to bind Africans not to have nuclear weapons. And who in his right mind had them to sign this nonsense, right? So Africans have been really to rethink this. And this was signed off not only by the African Union, but also under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. That is a huge issue. And so that treaty is called the Pelindaba. Pelindaba is a Zulu word that means, end of story or conclusion. It's so apropos. Yeah, interesting. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, I was there. 3 weeks ago, I was there. I was in Pelindaba, not far away from it. There's a very small city there where I go to do some shopping and so forth. It's just extraordinary. So that treaty captures that idea that Africa must be a nuclear weapon-free zone. That's what you have there. So I don't think that what Russia and Mali and Burkina Faso are signing are so security huge concern. And I think people build it up and then worry people so that these kind of technologies don't come to Africa. However, there may be other sources of energy production that we don't know of. We could find them in China, in the United States, or probably in Russia. But at this stage, what Mali and Burkina Faso are saying is, we can't wait for that. We're doing our business with Russia.
Koffi, 2 points. One, it didn't occur to me, quote unquote, these darkies can't do it. That's not where I was coming from with that. The second point, there's nothing else to add to that. From my point of view, Africa, just like any other country, they have people who are talented and capable and can obviously support civilization, especially when they have these technologies and the people are trained on their technologies. There's nothing special or different about Africans or any other country in that regards. People are people, at least from my point of view. And the other front, I guess what I was, you brought up something that the U.S., France, especially with a certain level of ire, considering that in their mind they lost various parts of Africa or various countries in Africa, Sahel states being, I guess, the conglomerate of states that they effectively lost, are not necessarily looking with this idea of we want the best for Africa or we want the best for Sahel states. They want you all to fail. So let's be honest, right? There's a certain amount of ire. They're shaking their fists at the fact that they are losing power in various parts of Africa and specifically the Sahel states. So yes, of course they want them to fail. And I guess in my mind, terrorists are their instrument of trying to create that failure. Hence the attacks on Burkina Faso after, I don't think it's coincidence at all, when Ibrahim Traore got back into the country. That's all I meant by that. It wasn't that you guys couldn't do it. It was more so about the opposition that you're going to face in trying to do it because of the players that don't want you to succeed in this, and that there's going to have to be a heavy amount of security to make that work and ensure that work. For example, China right now, in various parts of Pakistan, you have terrorists attacking Chinese workers who are trying to build out
infrastructure,
Belt and Road. Yeah, and so do we believe that those terrorists are doing that willy-nilly? Or do we believe that those terrorists are bankrolled by certain forces that don't want China to be successful for the Belt and Road? I strongly suggest it's that they don't want them to be successful. To be clear, that's not a reason for Africa to not do it. They should do it. As you pointed out, energy independence is a prerequisite to having a decent society. And to be able to defend yourself as a society, because you need to be able to have an industry to build weapons and those type of things to defend yourself. Third point, the entire point of weapons are to kill people and defense. It's not that you want to use them to kill people. It's more so that if you have opposition, those weapons are needed in order to defend yourself from players that are not necessarily.
It's a deterrence.
It's a deterrence. Yeah, exactly. So I don't take issue with Sahel states building weapons. I would argue they need them, considering the 100 people that just got killed when those terrorists attacked Burkina Faso. I know this sounds brutal, but it's just true. It's military is the beating heart of a society, and a country needs to be able to defend itself first and foremost before it can do anything else. So no issue on that front. And I agree with you. The ramifications are awesome. Like, if this is something that gets spread all throughout Africa, then you get Africa as a continent being able to grow, not just materially, but also in the context of its own sovereignty. Like your ability to build things, your ability to feed, the ability to export. It becomes a thriving, growing continent in a way that we haven't seen prior. So
Sure.
no, I thoroughly agree with you.
I mean, one of two things. The first one is to follow up on what you just said. Yes, there's no way out. It's a prerequisite.
Yes.
It's a fundamental necessity for Africans to know how to, understand, the nature of energy. That's what the universe is all about. When Einstein put his theory of relativity, at the heart of it, next to the equal sign, right? Yeah, next to the equal sign, E for energy, M equals E, what's that, C squared, right? And there are people, it's so powerful. In fact, as I was saying to you in one of our conversations, when he sent the letter to, president, I think which president was that?
Yeah, he sent it to FDR.
Yeah, he said, people didn't say that. I mean, the undertone was make sure the niggers were sitting in the Congo, don't monopolize this uranium. Make sure that they don't. I mean, they don't put them in letters, but we know how they're talking. And then so the Congo, the Belgian Congo, CIA, and all these people managed to really capture the reserve in the eastern side of Congo in Katanga. They got some of the highest grade uranium. I think uranium in the table of element is 92. So U 250, 253. I mean, they got all different 54, 43, and so forth. But
Yeah.
it is clear that Africa's got plenty of it. Even in Burkina Faso and Mali, they have some uranium that they can use to power their energy and in their industrial growth.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing. And so there are also new sources of energies that are showing up. And China has taken advantage of something that was supposed to be worked on in 1959 in the US, way long time, called trillium. Trillium is another element. I think it's
Or is it
element.
thorium? Wait, is it thorium or trillium?
Yeah, thorium. Sorry, thorium. Sorry. How did I get to trillium? Maybe I
Okay.
just invented one.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I
no,
could be wrong.
yeah, we talked about it. It's thorium, yes, and thorium is element 90. So it's got the little connection. It's part of the same family of energy, close, not far away from uranium. And in fact, some of its derivative, when it's been processed, turn into uranium. Very interesting. And China is now leading. Last month, when they made the announcement that China will using it, will be able to produce it in limited energy for 60,000 years. Of course, everybody sits down and says, this is not possible, right? And we know that the Chinese are breaking down that kind of worldview that is not possible. A lot of things are now being possible. They're creating all sorts of things. I mean, beside uranium, nuclear power plant, if we can get also some kind of trillium-based, not trillium, thorium-based. I don't know why I'm thinking that was
Just
really, there's something.
60,000 years. It's like, I'm sorry.
Years,
I'm
of
sitting here like,
energy.
wait, 60,000 years?
Yes.
That sounds.
Yeah, I know you and I had this debate when you were at Sputnik that there's no perpetual
I'm very skeptical about the 60,000
energy.
years thing. That sounds
But
like a
60,000
perpetual
years,
motion
this is
machine.
huge.
Yeah,
And
but
if
go
they
ahead.
can produce that in the Gobi Desert where the plants are, I mean, this is enormous for us, for the rest of the world. And the Chinese have a different model. They don't have the capitalist model where you have to make profit and sell it and squeeze the scarcity to make money and so forth.
That's right.
They'll say, in fact, they can change that. It could be a game changer to change the nature of energy production, utilization, distribution, and then usage around the world and say, okay, African countries, last week China has decided to give you free trade for anything. You can trade with us. We don't have taxes on trade with Africa. I mean, this was a big deal. It's 53 African countries. Only one is not getting this is Eswatini, former Swaziland, because it's still having a relationship with Taiwan, right?
Interesting.
But there, what the Chinese can say is, this is interesting. Why don't we give this extra energy to the African continent as well? Let's find a way to give it to them for free. I mean, this will be a huge game changer. I'm not saying it's going to take place, but this can just shovel everything around in a way that Western countries have never seen it. And it will transform the earth into something else. And this is at the heart of it: energy production, manufacturing, control, distribution, and usage. And very few people are talking about. This is at the core of the debate. Even the conflict between Israel, United States, and Iran, it's about energy, people. And that's a clear thing of it. China is now sucking up is getting a good deal from Iranian oil and gas, So it's about energy, largely. The politics will come after that. But another one we shouldn't also forget is that all of that comes at a cost. There are many dimensions of those costs. The first one, of course, is the implicated global politics. The West going to be worried about, oh my goodness, these, nigger countries are getting, some power there. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the truth.
No, you're fine. Look, if that's how you think, they.
We need to stop.
And by the way, I do think they think that. Like,
no, they do.
They have this imperial.
Yeah,
they have this imperial point of view. That all of these countries are, even the way they talk in these terms. So
and as soon as there's a breakdown of that kind of mindset, many of these African countries will start to sort of raise their spine a bit and do other things. Because if you have energy security, you're most likely to start thinking about anything else. You can power your house, you can power your industrial growth and other things. And if we can find partners to help us do that, all the best. And the cost of it will be on our own. Of course, we can use mineral to do a deal swap, bartering. So you get gold here, you get uranium. And that's what I think Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso and Assimi Goïta, the two military guys, have now realized that we've got to get some bargaining going. We can't be sitting on this wealth, mineral wealth, and sitting down and do nothing with it.
Yes.
And if we use them, so what? These are the wealth that belong to us. And of course, as you know, they've been nationalizing those gold mines because they want to use them as potential resource of revenues to feed into the cost to pay for those kind of nuclear power plants.
That's what I was going to get into for a moment. Africa is one of the richest continents on the planet. Yeah. And I think what the Sahel states realized was, okay, we need to control our wealth. And the wealth is material, like it is the resources that we have at our disposal that we can use as wealth in order to generate, and I'm saying dollars.
Remember what I've been saying, and that you should, I'm not putting a trademark on it, but this is something you're going to hear more and more. You'll see, but Koffi talked about this way back, and I said it again. Somebody's going to take it and run with it because I need to write a paper about it. Is what I call the table of element economy. That's it. The table of element economy. This is going to be the strength of Africa if our leaders can understand that and use it well. In fact, I was telling a couple of friends way back, I said, there's this talk about Africa having all these minerals, but close to all their leaders, if you were to show them a piece of those minerals, they won't be able to identify and say, oh, by the way, this is iridium, this is uranium, this is so and so. They have no clue about the asset that's sitting on.
Well, I guess from my point of view, being able to marshal those things into wealth. And, it's funny, you have U.S. senators who are like, we don't understand why Africa's poor. And it's like, okay, well, you got your wish. They will now be rich, and they will be led by the Sahel states in that direction of using that wealth. Do you think the fact that, especially if these groups of states are successful, that the other states are going to follow? I mean, ECOWAS has to be standing there thinking to themselves, oh my God, what have we lost? Especially moving forward. Like this, I guess what I'm asking is Sahel states going to be this kind of roadmap for the African states? And do you think it would take a push in order to do it? Or do you think they can do it within the context of the governments that they have at their disposal already?
Look, they can do it. They can do it. They've proven that they can do it. Last January the 29th, 2025, they officially left ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, created in 1975. This was a huge break. In fact, because of that, ECOWAS leaders are chewing their own tails. And people in the region are now asking themselves, what do we do? We've just lost, and these countries are big. I mean, Mali is over 1 million square kilometers. Niger is over 1 million kilometers. Burkina Faso is about 320 or so, a little bit less than that. So this is a huge space area. And having lost not just the geographic boundaries, but also the reputation that ECOWAS cannot maintain, the quality of life. There's one great thing that ECOWAS has managed to maintain, the movement of goods and people. That has been a greater success. But of course, ECOWAS is trying to move also to add more taxes. So to answer directly your questions, while ECOWAS is chewing the tails, success breeds success, Jamal. So if these countries and their leaders can be there for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we're already hearing, I'm sure you've seen the news, that there's rumbling around Togo. It's a small country, but there have been a lot of protests going on saying we want to overthrow the government, we want to join the Sahelian states. And there's also rumors around Ivory Coast and other countries So it's a growing thing. If as soon as there's a confidence to see that happen, and it's not about military regime or civilian regime with democracy. People are saying whatever regime or whatever situational government you have, can we feed ourselves well? Can we be secure? Can we have electricity? Can we have water? The bare necessity of what we usually call the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and have decent space for us to act and live like a sovereign state and not having to have somebody coming from Paris to tell us what we should do, or Washington or Berlin or so forth. And I think this is where it's going. So the language is, of course, a little bit confusing: neocolonialism, colonialism, post-colonial, all these nonsense. But at the heart of it, it's the basic reality that Africans want to see changed to their advantage. And they can't wait to see it. And it's going to spread across the continent when it works well.
It's like Napoleon in a weird way, right? It's like there's a democracy fetish that comes out of the West. But if you can't feed yourself, then what does the democracy matter? It's failing on its most basic purpose of a government, right? And so you get somebody to come in, wipes it all away. This is what we're going to do. The public backs him. The public says, hey, this guy seems to be on the up and up. He seems to be doing the right things, and he seems to be working in our interests. And you get that taking place in multiple other states. I guess, I don't know, it's fascinating. It just really is.
And another thing that I wanted to add to you, the sort of supplement to what I was talking about Pelindaba. Remember, please. South Africa was one of the only nuclear power on the continent,
yes,
helping Israel. I'm sure you're aware of that. So this was called, there was a term they used, something alliance, I forgot the term, but a nefarious term they used. And South Africa has helped Israel feed its nuclear energy. Now, one of the key element, basic big components to reach the liberation of South Africa was for the Black liberation struggle parties and groups to abandon its nuclear energy program, period.
Yeah.
You see that? So there's a huge implication there that, my goodness, can we, Black people can't have nuclear energies, or other brown people can't have it. We've seen that, but it's not true. But it's a huge issue because it informs the way the rest of the continent has been going. But I think there will be a resurgence very quickly of nuclear energy. But if not, thorium and other sorts of energies, we know that solar energy is not quite yet there, although it's powering things, but it's not still very stable and reliable. It's still very costly. Yeah. And then all kinds of technological problems. But at the heart of it, I think if Russia can really consolidate this project in Mali and Burkina Faso to get to power the industrial growth, but also just homes so that people have light and everything else, I think it's a great start.
Koffi, it is fantastic. It really is. Thank you for this. Man, I always appreciate these conversations. I am always fascinated by this stuff. We don't get a huge amount of press about what's taking place on the African continent. So your breakdowns I always find informative, and I always appreciate when you join me. And I think the audience also does too. I mean, we have over 900 people here. So thank you for this, man. Koffi Kouakou, African Analyst, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. You be safe, okay? Have a good day.
Thank you.